Good morning, everyone. Happy Sabbath. So, as you know, the church has been shut, but that doesn't mean we still can't enjoy our story time together. So, every Saturday morning or Sabbath morning, I am going to continue reading one chapter from our book, Singers on the Sand. And when this book finishes, if we're still not back in our church, then I will grab another book and we'll read from that one as well. I have lots of fantastic books, so we're still going to have plenty of chances for story time. So, if you guys all remember, last week when we read the book, we heard about how the witch doctor Tamar had just arrived back from the village on the other side of the island, and as he arrived back, he came across the missionary family, or the teacher's family, who was in their hut with all the other kids and members of the village, and they were singing. And the power of the music they were singing was so strong that it made him fall over. And now he's very worried about what's going to happen to his village. So we're now going to read chapter 4, and this chapter is called Marta. The witch doctor and Chief Meriden sat in the hut where Tamar lived. It was evening of the day after Tamar returned to his village, tired and hungry and full of anger because of the new magic the teacher had brought to the island of Great Sangar. The two men sat and talked about what had been done to rid the village of the teacher's family. Over and over, they came back to Tamar's suggestion that the only plan that held any promise was to bring Islam teachers from the southern islands and encourage the people to follow the customs of Islam. Now, when the new teacher comes, Tamar advised the chief, you must give them the good garden land, right behind the teacher's house. You know how it slopes up the hill there, but it is not too steep and it is rich. Anything will grow there. Tamar felt better than he had since he left the village on the other side of the island. His stomach was full again and the chief agreed to his plan. I will see that the Islam teachers have a fine new house and they can plant all sorts of vegetables and fruit trees. They will prosper because you and I will see to it that they get the best of everything. The chief's voice sounded cheerful again. But I'm sure this is the best way, the only way. Little by little the people will see that Islam is best, because it will not take away from our old customs. When Chief Meriden left Tamar's hut, he stood tall and strong. The witchman knew that he would lose no time in carrying out the plans they had made. Tamar unrolled his sleeping mat and stretched out on it. He was so tired from his long walk across the island that he ached in every joint. Then it began to rain, and he thought wearily that now he must get up and move his mat because it was right under the bad place in the roof. Then he remembered the roof was mended. He settled back on his mat with deep satisfaction. Now, why did the teacher mend my leaky roof? Tamar asked himself. I wouldn't have done it. He remembered that the hut where he had slept on the other side of the island had a big hole on its roof, and he had never thought of mending it. Tamar slept for a while, for he was tired, and also a big load had been lifted from his mind since the chief had agreed to his plan about the Islam teachers. The sun had already risen when he awakened the next morning. As he went down to bathe, he saw people coming and going between the village and the teacher's house on the beach. There were 2 springs in the village, one in the jungle a little way behind Tamar's hut, and another near the centre of the village. The people used both of them, but the one in the centre of the village was larger, and the women gathered there to gossip and bathe, so the men often used the jungle spring. Tamar always used it unless for some special news he wanted to gather or some village problem that he knew would be talked about at the village spring. After his bath, Tamar walked down to the beach to get a look at the teacher's father's house by daylight. The whiteness of everything astonished him. When he saw the green plants growing around the house in their trough of whitewashed stands, he drew in his breath with a sharp whistle. Then he heard a noise. He looked towards the lower beach and saw a boy with flaming red hair. This must be the teacher's son. No one had told him about this boy. The witch doctor could only stare at such bright hair and marvel at how it could have grown out of a human head. The red-haired boy was not alone. The chief's son Satu was with him. The two scurried off among the coral rocks, chattering and gesturing after the manner of boys who are best friends. Not a bit too soon, not a bit too soon, Tamar muttered to himself as he walked back to his hut. He cooked his breakfast and threw out the soiled leaves he had used for plates. Then he saw something that widened his eyes with surprise and made him lay his hand across his pounding heart. A small child, was coming toward his open door. She wore a long pink dress that fluttered in the wind. Her shiny yellow hair hung in two flat braids down her back. Her face was round and sweet, and her eyes were the blue color of sky on a cloudless day. The child must belong to the big teacher. But what was she doing here? She did not pause, but came right up the ladder and into Tamar's hut. She did not act surprised to see him. She carried a little bunch of red flowers. She held them out to him and smiled. The child was beautiful. Tamar looked at her with a feeling in his chest that was almost an ache. He knelt on the floor and took the blossoms from her little white hand. He touched her small fingers, and they felt warm and moist. He took the little hand in his, and the child laughed and spoke words he could not understand. Then she pulled her hand away, ran for the broom made of coconut fibers, and whisked it into every corner of the room, brushing and sweeping with painstaking care. Then she went to the fireplace and lifted the cooking pot. Tamar watched her from the back window as she lugged the heavy kettle into the jungle spring, scoured it with sand and washed it clean in the flowing water. Then she carried it back up the ladder and set it upside down on beside the cooking place. All the time she worked, she sang a soft little song to herself. "She is like a bird, a small pink bird," the witch man said to himself. "She works and sings. But I'm sure her father and mother don't know that I am home. They would never let her come here if they knew." When her work was finished, the hut swept clean, every speck of ash brushed from the clay stove, the child looked out the open door toward her own house on the beach. She started to go down the ladder, then came back and held out both hands to Tamar. She smiled, her blue eyes danced as she tried to make him understand words of her queer language. Then she hurried down the ladder and ran along the path to the beach and home. Tamar watched her until she went into the door of her own house. Then he turned back to the empty hut. The day was suddenly darkened. Was the morning rain coming so soon? He looked out the door again, but not a cloud floated across the blue heaven. The witch man sat down in his clean hut and began to store away the charms and medicines from his pack. He sorted the bundles of roots and herbs. He polished the bones and teeth. One of his clusters of slick black seeds had broken apart, and he spent the middle part of the day braiding new strings to hold the charms. As he worked, he thought of the little child. She was different from any child he had ever seen before. No island girl had ever had such eyes and hair. But it wasn't that either. No, it wasn't her looks. After all, black hair and eyes are much more beautiful than those pale colors. But this little one was so friendly. Something loving and kind spread from her like a light or a perfume. He tried to put her out of his mind, how she had trusted him, how she had spoken to him, how she had held out her two small hands, how she had cleaned his house, his cooking place, and his kettle. He looked around the bunch of flowers she had brought and found them on one of the low benches. He filled half a coconut shell with water and put the flowers in it. Then he set the coconut shell dish in the back window and was glad to see the twigs brighten and freshen during the day. Tamar knew that he must make important plans. It was not enough to call the Islam teachers. It was not enough to mark off a rich piece of garden land for them, or even to build a house where they might live. No, he must think of some way to show the village people that the magic wand of the big teacher could be broken, that the teacher himself could be made to suffer, because he taught things contrary to the spirits that had angered the devils and controlled the fire mountain. He sorted out his charms and selected the three most powerful ones: a goat's skull, a huge shark's teeth, and a dried snake, which he had got from a mighty witch doctor on the big southern island. There were no such things as snakes on Sangar. Tamar knew that everyone in the village respected his charms for the wonderful things they had done in times past. It was for him to choose now what kind of curse he would lay on them. In the secret place of his lonely hut, Tamar called on the devils of his acquaintance. He brought out the magic oil, mixed it with strong herbs, and smeared it all over his body. He rubbed it on the 3 charms, laying a powerful curse on each. Now he must arrange some plan so the big teacher would touch one of the charms. Then the evil magic was sure to work, and there would be a sickness or accident in some terrible calamity. The evil spirit sometimes made some surprising trouble that even the witch doctor could not foresee. But it always worked in the direction of punishing the one for whom the curse was laid. Tamar had just put all his charms away when Chief Meriden appeared. Tamar invited him in. "It is all arranged," the chief said. "I will take 10 of the village men. I have chosen those who like to run to the teacher's house all the time. We are almost ready to leave now." Tamar laughed. "I have not been idle, you know. I have already prepared the devil charms. Now I must think of some way to put one of them in the teacher's way, so he will have to touch it. Then, well, you know, anything might happen. But it will not be good for the teacher." Chief Meriden laughed too. Both men felt in as merry a mood as Tamar could remember. "It seems to me that the Fire Mountain is quieter today," Chief Meriden said as he went down the ladder. "Oh, those fire spirits will settle down as soon as we have taken care of this matter," Tamar said. Chief Meriden hesitated on the stairlight ladder. "There is another thing," he said. "I would like to take my son Satu along with me, but if I do, you will have no chance to instruct him before Islam teachers come. Also, if some bad things happen to me, well, you know, it would be a great misfortune if both of us should be lost. You know our customs about chiefs." "No, you should not take the boy. I can see that he has already been snared by the magic of these people, but I will break the magic by the time you return. I hope he'll be as ready as you are to follow Islam." Still the chief hesitated on the ladder. "It is my wish that you should use kindness and patient reasoning to bring this boy back to his senses. He will not respond to anger and force." After the chief had gone, Tamar decided that the best way to deal with Satu was to tell him the truth and use persuasion to separate him from the teacher and the boy Hans. Within a few hours, Tamar saw the fishing boat pull away from the landing. He knew that 11 men on board were not going after fish. They had sailed for the southern island and when they returned, they would bring the religion of Mohammed to Great Sangar. So that's the end of today's chapter. There's just one little picture here that I'll show you. It is the picture of Marta giving the flowers to the witch doctor. So that's all for this morning, and next Sabbath morning I will read to you guys the next chapter. But isn't it pretty amazing how this witch doctor thinks that he can use silly little symbols that he thinks are going to scare God away from looking after the teacher and his family. I think we're going to see just how powerful God can be in this story and how much the devil has no impact over him at all. Happy Sabbath, guys, and we'll talk next week. Bye.